philosophy classes. We do most of our Coreq with the actual English 1301 course. So we'll talk about some different strategies that you may be able to use on your campus, depending on how you're going to set it up there at your campus. So hopefully what you'll take away from this session today are some strategies that you can use to effectively run these courses, regardless of how you set them up, whether you're going to keep everything developmental writing, Coreq English 1301, or whether you're going to branch out and try to teach this with some other departments and some other professors. One of the things that I mentioned is one of the ways we like to do it at Dallas College is the same teacher teaches developmental writing as the teacher that teaches English 1301, but that's not always possible. So we'll give you some strategies to how to work with another professor should you either decide to go outside of your discipline, or whether the 1301 teacher is different than the developmental writing teacher. So we'll go through some of those things as well. So let's get started first by actually understanding who this developmental writing student is. I'm a firm believer that if you don't understand who your student is, it's pretty irrelevant what strategies you're going to put into place. They just won't work if you don't know who your student is and tailor those strategies to meet your students. So at Dallas College, our developmental students kind of break down into two different, very wide-ranging age groups. The first is the age group that you see there on the left of your screen, the 14 to 25-year-olds. And the reason I include 14-year-olds is because we have a heavy dual credit enrollment on our campus. We work with so many ISDs, I lost count. I meant to write it down, but we have just a ton of dual credit partners. And so we get a lot of 14-year-olds who are not ready necessarily or that English 1301 class, and so they're taking a development class while they're doing that. And then the other big group of students we have is that group of students who's returning to school. They left sometime after they graduated high school. They may have tried college and they didn't like it or it didn't work out, so they went and they established a job or a family of some sort, and now they're coming back. So as you look at that screen, the left and the right sides of the screen, this is just kind of how our developmental writing students break down. And I think they're how your developmental writing students are going to break down as well. The big thing with the younger group is they are a very technology-centered group. I noticed that a lot of these students don't really take notes of things they should be taking notes about. And so sometimes I'll stop my developmental writing class and we won't necessarily talk about an English skill. We'll talk about a note-taking skill, because I noticed they love to take pictures of my PowerPoints. And then we talk about how that's not really an effective strategy for learning it. So we may take a class period to talk about note-taking, or I'll give them guided notes or something of that nature to kind of help build that skill as well. The other thing you need to know about this group is that they don't like to sit still for very long. And so you're going to need a classroom that's moving them around, that's keeping them actively engaged in the process. And then a big irony that I think of the 14 to 25-year-old group is that they're a very social group. They absolutely love to talk. But when you put them in a big group and ask them to discuss something school-based, it goes dead quiet. So we'll give you some strategies to work with that as well. In the older group, some of those things that you're going to have to be aware of. I think that second point there on the right is probably the most important when dealing with this 26 and up crowd, is that in a lot of respects, they've just forgotten how to do school. They took those gap years, or they tried school and went away, but there's been a gap. And so they're having problems coming back. And so some of the things I do in my classes is I remind them of effective ways to do school, and I incorporate those into the lessons as well. It doesn't happen very often, but you may see some conflicts in the room as the two age groups don't necessarily get along all of the time. And so we'll give you some strategies to talk about that today. So as you look at the screen, are there any you'd like to talk about in more detail? Are there any that you feel that I have left out that are maybe more important than some of the ones that I put on the screen? What do you guys feel about this breakdown of the age groups here? Is it pretty accurate for what you see, or is it very different?
I agree. I think it's it all, like I said, it's what I see, but I've never seen it in the list. So I thank you for doing that.
I would add in that I have a lot of um, immigrants that may be a little older. Some even have degrees from their home countries. And like my Coreq right now is like this, and it's the most amazing Coreq I've ever had. But sometimes you have some like really high functioning. They know how to study, they know how to do school. They're just doing it in a different language.
Right. And that was something that we were talking about in our department meeting on Wednesday. And I wrote it down on my note card yesterday when I was practicing this, and I've lost my note card. Immigrants and your school may want to be careful how you handle this. We have really geared our immigrants into a developmental writing English 1301. That's how we co-rec them together. But there's some talk that we may go back to a way that we used to do it, where we gear immigrants to go into an ESL style class. And then co-rec that with something else to kind of help them along in their nature. So we were kind of throwing around, just beginning the discussion on how we want to handle that moving forward, because immigrants do bring a very different perspective to the classroom. And while they meet a lot of these criteria, it's that language barrier that causes some problems. And so what are some effective ways to do that? So thanks for reminding me of that. And that is something that you probably need to work with your different colleges, because everybody's going to handle that a little bit differently. So seeing that we have a wide range of age groups, it's very difficult to teach this wide range of age groups in the different ways. And so over the last 14 years or so, I have tried a wide variety of teaching strategies to kind of meet all of these groups where they are. And what we're going to talk about are some of the ones that I've had the most effectiveness with over the last couple of years. So the very first one that I have really had a lot of success with is losing the lecture. Especially if I teach the developmental writing course, I make sure that developmental writing course runs a lot like a workshop. We have a very specific task that we're going to get done that day. It's kind of like flipping the classroom, which you'll see a little bit further down. The students can bring in what they need to get done for their 1301 class, and then I just kind of I put them in groups. Sometimes it's where the small group conferencing comes in. So if 4 or 5 of them want to work on an essay, but 4 or 5 of them are behind on their reading, we'll break them out into those 2 groups. And then I will spend a lot of time just jumping back and forth in between the groups. What exactly are we struggling with here? What exactly do you need? Maybe you just needed a work day because you had to work late last night. Maybe you just need an hour today where you can actually start rough drafting or whatever it is, wherever you are in the writing process. So losing the lecture works very well for the developmental writing students. I've also started to lose the lecture when I teach the 1301 students. We'll talk a little bit more about how I've done that when we get further down on this particular slide. So we kind of talked about small group conferencing as well. One of the very first things that I do is usually on the second day of class is I have the developmental writing students take a diagnostic test, because I know that they didn't pass the test, but I don't know exactly why they didn't pass the test. And then so over that weekend, I can kind of look at their diagnostic scores and I can put them into the groups that best need them or that best meet their needs. And then I can put them with people who are stronger than them, and I can get classmates to teach them while I'm teaching another group, or I'll put all the weak ones in a group and I'll focus on that group for the day. I turn people who are strong in that area off, turn them loose and let them go work on something that they want to work at as well. Another particular thing that I've had good success with, especially in the developmental writing class, and I'm starting to see good benefit from this in the 1301 class as well, is that I flipped my classroom. I've taken a lot of these lectures that 10, 15 years ago, I was using the whole hour and 20 minutes to give this lecture. I've taken a lot of these lectures and I've boiled them down into very short YouTube videos that I let my students watch, and I ask them to watch it, one of the night before class or 2 nights before class or whatever the case may be. And then we actually do work in the classroom. They're watching the lectures outside of classroom and they're doing work inside the classroom. And that's bred some benefits as well. Probably the biggest thing I can tell you, especially because YouTube tracks when students are dialing out of a video, they'll tell you when your students are not watching it anymore. And I've noticed that a lot of students, they stop watching the video somewhere around the 7-minute mark. So years ago, I was making 20-minute videos and they're watching less than half of the video. So I've got almost all of my videos down to 10 minutes now, and I've got probably 70% of those that are at 10 minutes are probably around 7 minutes. So I try to keep it short for the students so they can interact with the video, get it done, and move on. But if you're going to do this technique, make sure your video is not going long because your students will turn it out. The play is learning. This really, really worked well for developmental writing students. That website there is called chompchomp.com. When I was a student, kill and drill was kind of the way that English was taught. We would go in, we would diagram sentences, we would, a word in this sentence needs to be replaced, find that mistake, just all of those things that I came up with doing. I found that the kill and drill is not very effective with students, but a better way to do kill and drill is this website, chompchomp.com right here. It gives students kind of those questions. Here's a sentence. How could we write this sentence better? Here's a paragraph. What sentence doesn't need to be in it? Different things like that. And then the students interact with it and they play a game. So they win points, and then you can, if you want to, you can take those points and turn them into grades. I don't. I keep this simply as play, but I do have a colleague who takes some of those points and turns them into grades for the students. They get to play the games as much as they want. As I mentioned on another slide, some of our students are older, and so they bring families to the environment, and this is a good game that they can play with their older elementary and middle school aged kids. That's really who these grammar lessons were designed for, are middle school type students between the ages or between the grades of 6th and 9th grade. So it gives them a chance to play with their kids while they're doing homework, while they're learning, things of that nature. And then it kind of helps their kids learn too, based on what they are doing. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this in the classroom as well. But I said earlier, I haven't been completely able to walk away from the lecture, especially when it comes to those 1301 students. So I want to give you that side of the class as well. So one thing I've done to my 1301 lectures is something we're going to do right about now. So if you want to get those breakout rooms ready, we're about to try to use them. We both struggle with breakout rooms, so hopefully this will work. If not, we'll just kind of do it the way we did it a minute ago, where we let everybody talk. But one of the things that I do is I try to talk for about 10 minutes. And if I run a little long, that's okay, because I think right now I'm running at about 12 minutes. If I run a little bit shorter, that's okay. But at the end of my little presentation, I stop the class and then they turn and they talk to their partner. You can do this in as groups as small as 2 or groups as big as 4. If you get over 4, it really doesn't work because you want to give everybody a chance to talk. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this over to you guys here in just a second. We're going to put you in a group and we're going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes to talk to each other about anything that we've talked about today. Is there something that you don't understand? Is there an idea that you thought was really cool? Is there an idea that you've tried and it just didn't work? So we're going to give you 2 minutes to talk to each other, and then we're going to bring you back as a group and we're going to talk collectively about those ideas for 2 minutes. And then we're going to move on to the next thing that we're going to talk about. And again, all of these time ranges are flexible. So if you're noticing that your class is really into something, don't stop just because it's been 2 minutes. Go ahead and let that time go out. And this is going to require some careful planning on your part because you might not be able to get through everything you meant to when you start turning things over to the class like that. So let's go ahead and activate those breakout rooms. We're going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes to talk about anything that you have heard today, interesting, not interesting, however you want to do it.
Hello. Are you there, Dana? I think we're supposed to process what we heard. Oh, I get it.
Hi there.
Hi. I think she said she's trying to multitask in another meeting, so she may not be able to join us. But
Okay. I really like the how you reminded us about our immigrant students. I think that really changes the dynamics.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like the students tend to be a lot older, in my experience. So I think that was a good addition.
Yeah, I don't know what fairy dust sprinkled over my class this semester, but typically I have like one or two in there that are kind of in that, demographic. I mean, I often will have younger ones, and they're just kind of just like any other 18-year-old, but
Right.
I've got a lady that has a business law degree in my class right now, and this is her third language. And I have a student who's from Italy, and her father is here working, I think temporarily. And she came over and she's like, well, I guess I'll just enroll in class. So this is like a high level student, but she's in a different language.
Right.
And so you can tell like her thought process when she writes. Oh my gosh, it's right there. It's just the idiomatic type stuff that's, kind of getting her. So, oh my gosh. Like, I'm sure next semester it'll be, just back to the grind, but this has been a great class. But I like, I have videos because of, teaching during the pandemic. They're not awesome. I hadn't thought about the kind of the lecture, think, pair, share type thing. I hadn't thought about doing that, but even if I had a little sheet that they were following along with to kind of lecture for a little bit, stop, have them do a problem or something, and then share. I think that's a really good idea. That would be fairly easy to implement. I don't know.
I like the point he made about the 7 minutes.
Yeah.
That's hard though. Like you're barely getting started. It's like 7 minutes. Okay, stop.
Yeah.
So having to retrain my brain.
Yeah. And I've linked some. I don't think I've made any grammar videos. I certainly have made literature and writing ones. They're not great. And my husband actually just finished a degree in online education. I'm like, maybe
he's like critiquing.
you please take over my video making for me, because I don't know, animate it or something.
Right. No, yeah, that's not a gift I have.
No.
Okay, let me just check the time. I think we're at the 2 minutes.
Awesome.
So, okay, so I'm going to leave the breakout room.
Recording in progress.
All right, so hopefully you got a little bit of an idea of how that works. I think we're missing 2 people. They should be tagging in here any minute. Anything you guys want to report out about what happened in your group?
So I'm finding a lot of things to think about. I'm actually teaching only the Coreq part next semester, which I've never done before. I've always been like the boss of both sides. And I'm doing it with psychology. So it's just gonna be like really interesting and crazy. But I think there's some things that I'd like to do definitely that you brought up. One is the lecture 10-2-2, and just kind of have those practice times built in. I kind of do this a little bit of as more like 20-2-2. It probably should be longer, or 20-10, 5 or something. And then I haven't made videos for grammar stuff. I do have videos for the other things I teach, but not for the grammatical stuff. And that's something to think through for sure.
Anything the second group wants to report out? Because there were only 2 groups. I got to see the break rooms real quick before they dissolved.
I assume the second group would be our group.
Yeah.
An interesting discussion about what we see as helpful in developmental education going across. And one of the things that Helen mentioned was that uh, the students seem to be really engaged in the class session before a test, and they're really interested in, I want to learn this so I can pass this test and I can do well. And we talked about the possibility that it might be interesting to make those tests smaller tests and do that sort of thing more often, so the student has a better chance to focus on, I'm getting ready for a test for this piece and I'm getting ready for a test for this piece. So
Yeah, I think breaking things down into small groups is great. And admittedly, I approach this as an English teacher. I know somebody in the group that I was in for very briefly is a math teacher. So some of these strategies that I'm going to give you won't necessarily work, but I think they can be tweaked, because I'm real big on chunking things down, especially for the developmental section of the class. One of the things that I do is I have the students journal. This is what you were supposed to read in your 1301 class. Now write me a quick summary about it, or if we don't want to check for a learning, apply this to something that's going on in the real world, and then we can check that particular skill. I think for a math teacher, what you could do with journaling is tell me what you were feeling as you were trying to solve this problem. When were you stuck? When were you frustrated? When were you putting the book down and walking away? Those kind of things. The other thing I like about journaling is it makes the learning very, very reflective. And I think that's something that even a non-developmental student needs to do as they're learning, is be more reflective in their learning process. I also have the students keep a vocabulary journal, and this works really well, especially for those immigrant students who are learning a different language. And it's a vocabulary journal that they create instead of me just, hey, here's 5 words you need to learn this week. What I do is, hey, as you're watching TV, if there was a word you didn't understand, write it down. If you and I were talking and I used a word you didn't understand, write it down. If this happens in your government class, just come back to class with 5 words. And I don't care how you collected these 5 words. And then we work through it. We look the word up in the dictionary, and then we put that word into our own words. We make them use it in a sentence. But I think this last part is really what solidifies the learning. Is the students have to draw a picture of it. And if it's an online class, they have to go find an internet picture of it, so that they can kind of connect it. Because I think a lot of our students are visual learners, and we keep that going as well. Some other things that I have found very effective with these students, especially the developmental section of the class, is that second one that you see on your screen. I check in with them quarterly or biweekly. I've taught this class in as few as 5 weeks and as many as 16 weeks. We offer all kinds of different sections. So I try to check with them at least every other week, depending on how the class is set up. We talk about their grade. And again, that's getting them to reflect on their grade. You know, maybe they think they're doing a killer job and you're sitting there looking at a grade book and they haven't turned in any assignments. So this kind of helps you connect with what they're thinking compared to what you're thinking they should be doing. And then you can kind of level that playing field for them as well. Unfortunately, effort is not always reflected in the grade book. So I asked them, let's talk about your effort, because that's not something that I can necessarily see. You know, writing comes very easy for me. So I just kind of do it. Whereas some people work really, really hard at what they're doing. So give me some information about your effort. And then coming into this idea that students need to be reflective, this last assignment is probably the one that I have the most benefit with. And I use this regardless of whether I teach 1301 or developmental writing. If I'm teaching 1301, they have to give me this. If I'm teaching developmental writing, as soon as they turn in a 321 essay, within 48 hours, I have to get an email that answers these 3 questions. What 3 things would you do differently if you had one more day to work on this? What are 2 things that you're kind of concerned about or unsure whether you did them correctly in your essay or not? And then what is one thing that you're really proud of? And then I always make sure that we focus on that proud one. And then we start working on those other 2 areas that they have concerns in. And so they'll turn this email into me 4 to 5 times a semester, depending on whether I'm their teacher or there's another teacher, because everybody uses a slightly different number of essays. But it's really interesting to watch how, as they reflect, they grow in their writing over the course of that semester. So let's spend a couple more minutes here talking about some ways to maximize their retention. And if you're not an administrator, some of these things are going to be out of your control, but these are things that you need to advocate for when you do meet with your administrators, because they are things that have worked really, really well for us. at Dallas College. 2 years ago, we went down to no classes bigger than 15. And we have been on 15 for the last 2 years when it comes to that developmental class size. At the beginning, we were allowing teachers to take on extra students, but that's kind of gone away. Nobody can take on extra students. This is not a class where you're trying to bump up your paycheck by getting an extra student, being paid for that extra student. 15 is our flat number. We don't go above this anymore. We did notice that 18 was a good number. So if you've got a class, like we started at 25, so we didn't get to 15 overnight. You can kind of see that we walked it down to 20, we walked it down to 18, we walked it down to 15. And I think 15 is where we're going to stay for a while. Ideally, when you do co-rec it, the class that it's co-rec with, it doesn't need regular college students in it as well. So if you've got 15 in the developmental writing, those same 15 students should be the only students taking geology 1301. And here's where you may run into some issues going across disciplines. But if you're in English, it's pretty easy to do this. You may get some pushback because not only does your dean have to be on board, but if you're going out of the department, that other department's got to be on board as well. So expect some pushback there. But if you can get it, it's going to be great. Somebody mentioned this earlier. It's going to be the first time she's teaching the developmental class, and that's fine. But when you are teaching the English class, or when you're teaching the credit-bearing class, we don't want to change that class at all. We want all the changing to take place through the developmental class. That's the one where they're designed to get those tutorings. And that's why I said I've gone away from the workshop a lot in that developmental, or I've gone away from the lecture a lot in the developmental class and gone into the workshop. That way that 1301 class can stay pretty much as is. And then we help the students adjust in this secondary class. Another thing I've noticed, and this kind of goes back to the immigrant issue that we were talking about, but it's not necessarily something that exists just with immigrant students, is this last bullet point you see on your screen, is to be aware that a lack of awareness or exposure to academic literacies may be a bigger problem, or at a minimum equal to deficiencies in actual writing skills. I think we see developmental students, we're like, oh, they don't know where a comma goes, or oh, they have problems with periods. And that is true. But do be prepared that a lot of students just aren't ready for the 4 to 5 different kinds of essays that they're going to write in an English 1301 class. And so you may need to spend a lot of time talking about the actual essay style instead of all the commas and periods and things that you thought you were going to need to talk about. Another thing is when you're coming up with these assignments, especially in the 1301 or in the developmental, I've tried a mix of these in both classes. They have varying degrees of success. So there are things to talk about. I haven't actually done this first bullet point. I've been doing a lot of research on this for the last year in my graduate classes. And so I'm actually going to try this coming up in August. And so email me like around Thanksgiving and I'll let you know how this first one goes. But it sounded kind of interesting. And I've done a lot of research and it's gotten some good results. But when students turn in the work, you just put pass or fail on the work. You don't put a letter grade, you don't put a number grade, you just put pass or fail. If the student accepts the passing grade, then you go into your grade book and you put in the number or the letter, or however you do your grades, into the grade book, and it's non-changeable. Once you put a grade in, the grade is the grade. However, even if it's pass, but especially if it's no pass, the student can revise it. So when you give the work back to the student, you say pass, but it has serious comma mistakes, or no pass, has serious comma mistakes, run-ons, whatever the case may be. And so then those no pass students, they revise it. And then you can give them an amount of time that they have to turn this in. You can give them another week, you can give them 2 weeks, however long you want to work this, because it's going to increase your workload. It's going to get a little bit complicated. And then they resubmit the work. And then again, you'll write pass or no pass on it and the reason why. And then they'll have that option on their own. And this allows them to reflect about it, reflect about their learning. It's also not then just looking at all the corrections you made and then going in and making those corrections for themselves as well, and then turning it in. Very interesting way to do the grading. So I haven't done this yet, but the research indicates that it's a great way to improve student academics. I'm going to try this in August. Like I said, I'll give you my email here in a little while. If you want to just hit me up around Thanksgiving, I'll let you know how this one worked. I've got a teacher on our campus, and this is what she does. And she does this with her 1301 students because she's noticed that we have a lot of students who have dyslexia and dysgraphia, and writing is very difficult for them. So she lets them create a YouTube video. And in the YouTube video, they talk to her instead of writing an essay. But to meet the English requirements, what they have to do is YouTube creates auto captions for you. And so what they have to do in their video is they have to go into the captions and they have to make them grammatically correct, because YouTube will not do that. YouTube runs captions for any video you make as one big long sentence. And so then they have to go in and they have to edit the captions. And she's had a lot of success with this. I haven't tried this one yet as well. I don't really intend to try this one, but I think it's a great idea. I'll keep thinking about it, and I may try it at a later time. I do a lot of the giving the students time to reflect. We've talked about that a lot as well. I think reflection is a really big part of what we did. And then the final thing I want to talk about on this slide before we put you back into break rooms, so if you want to go ahead and get those break rooms set up, we'll get them there in just a minute, is to embed mentors if possible. And this is something that I had all set up and then COVID ruined it. We are directly across the street from an elementary school. And so I went into the elementary school and I met with the fourth grade language arts teachers, and I eventually met with the principal at that school. And what we were going to do is we were going to bring one of my developmental writing classes in, and we were going to bring them in on Tuesdays for that entire semester. And they were going to work with their writing students, because the goal was that your students are going to help my students become better writers, and my students are going to help your students become better writers, because they'll actually get to practice this. And we all know that when we get to teach something, or that when we get to collaborate, we learn more. And so ideally you would do this with a middle school in about 7th grade, because that's when they take the STAR test here in the state of Texas, but the elementary school was across the street. And so either bring mentors into your classroom or create a collaborative environment with an outside resource where your students can get practice, and they hear it and they see it in a different way. And I was really looking forward to that. And then spring break and COVID hit, and the whole plan went out the window. And elementary schools aren't quite ready to let us come back in yet, but things are weakening. And so hopefully we'll be able to try this out sometime in the future. So we're going to go ahead and put you in breakout rooms again. Same kind of concept. We'll get you in there for about 2 minutes. Things you've enjoyed, things that you would do differently, things you've tried and didn't work out. Sorry about that. I thought I got muted in all of that. Anybody want to report out from their group while I get everything wired back up here?
Part of our discussion was just getting clarification on the mentoring and the logistics. So just understanding that a little bit better.
So I think that's only going to work if you have like a 16-week class. Because like I said, we do this in 5, we do it in 8, and we do it in 16. Because what's going to happen is the school is going to want to run a background check on your students. And so what that was going to look like when we rolled it out is that first week of class, I was going to give the background checks so the student could go get them, fill them out, and the school runs them, and it's really quick. But if you haven't turned your background check into me by the end of week 2, you're going to get a 0 in this part of the class. So I built it into the grading, the participation part of their grade, so that I would get those back. And then it takes about 2 weeks for those to come back to the school. So you're looking at starting this around week 5 of your program, maybe week 6. So you've had a little bit of time to figure out where your students are. And then you can kind of collaborate with your partner school. And then you can kind of figure out how you guys want to approach it from there. And that still gives you 6 to 10 weeks to kind of do this with the students. And again, you're going to want something close. We're fortunate. It is just, we walk out the door, we cross the street, we walk in the door. And so I know not everybody's going to have that luxury, but that's how it would have worked. You can also see if you can get some of those teachers to come in. If you've got an AVID program at one of the middle schools close to where you're at, see if you can borrow their AVID tutors. You're going to have to pay them, but you might have that in your budget. So there's some effective things you can do. And if you want more information about those ways that I've tried it in the past, more than happy to give that information to you, because I get paying people is going to be a decision higher up on the food chain than most of us make. I kind of want to wrap up today's presentation with just some ways to make this effective if you're not the one running both classes. If you're running both classes, it's usually pretty easy. You kind of have a good idea of what's going on. But when you're one of 2, you're flying blind sometimes. And so kind of want to close out today giving you some strategies just in case you find that yourself in that situation where you are one of 2 instead of the one. And the big takeaway there is you've got to communicate. You have constantly got to be in communication with who your partner is. You have to know what they expect from their class. You have to make sure they know what they expect of your class. And then you have to be able to relay that information to the students, because as the top of the screen says, it's fundamental that students know they're in 2 classes, because they'll complain about the workload a lot. But let them know it's the workload of 2 classes. And when you're in this class, you're doing this. And when we're in this class, you're doing that. Also, try to have the developmental class meet in a different room than the regular class meets in. And again, I know that's decisions that are made outside of us, but if you can get your deans or whoever's in charge of your scheduling to do that, it really helps reinforce this idea. Plus, it often keeps the students from being in the same room for 3 hours at a time. When I was at one of our campuses last semester, and I had the 8 o'clock class, and then they had this English class at 9:20 in the exact same room. And so the students were in there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10:30, 10:50 in the morning. It's just too long. And so the more you can break it down, you've got to have great communication with your co-teacher. As a divorced parent, it kind of hit on me that this is really the way it works. Sometimes my ex and I get along great, and running the kids is fantastic. And sometimes we're not on the same page as anything at all. So you've got to be careful what you say in front of the students, because it's going to get repeated, whether you meant it to or not, or whether they even repeated it the way you said it, it's going to get repeated. So you've got to be very careful about what you say to each other, but you've also got to be on the same page. You need to talk to each other before things happen. You kind of need to get that out. and you need to see that. And one of the ways that I do that is I make sure that I initiate contact with the co-teacher. For instance, our registration for the fall opens next week. And so I've got a reminder on my to-do list next Wednesday. I'm going to contact the 1301 teacher that I'm teaching with this fall and say, hey, when do you want to talk this summer? When do you want to talk later this month? Let's start planning this class now, because if we wait till that week before class starts, it's just not enough time to effectively do this. While the course is going on, every Sunday morning, I'll send whoever I'm teaching. If it's somebody else, I'll send them an email and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing from the students. Is this what you're seeing? That way we can kind of plan out, hey, I think they're struggling with commas, but if you don't, where do you want me to teach them? Especially if I'm the developmental teacher for that respect. I really want to know where they're struggling from the 1301 person's perspective, because that's the class they actually need to pass. Fortunately, I'm usually partnered with somebody who's in my building so I can go in and see them face to face. Sometimes we meet weekly, sometimes we meet monthly, sometimes we do it all virtually. Everybody likes to do it a little bit different. So be flexible in how you meet with these things, but you've constantly got to be in communication with who your partner teacher is, where it's just not going to work out very well. So some words of wisdom, because some of the teachers that I have worked with have been amazing people and I have learned a lot from them. Some of them have not necessarily been up to the standards of what I would want in my partner. And so I can give you both sides of that coin. And so these are some of the techniques that I have learned in the last couple of semesters in doing this, is make sure you respect each other at all times. Even if I don't like you, I can respect you. I'm disagreeing with your ideas, not with who you are as a person. And as long as you can keep disagreements on that level where disagree with the idea, not you, generally you can find a way to solve that particular problem. Make sure you're clearly defining roles and responsibilities. I know you're in charge of the 1301 class and I'm in charge of the developmental class, but what do you need me to do in my developmental class so that the students perform? And sometimes it goes up to giving up that power of I know what's best. Let the teacher who's giving them their official transcriptical grade kind of give you some ideas and be willing to kind of let them be your guide as to what you do. And this is really important if you have to work across disciplines. How can we take this government reading and what do you want the students to learn from this? That's going to approach how I talk about reading skills in my developmental writing class. So be aware of those things. Be flexible. Things don't always go according to the plan. And that's perfectly okay. If you go in there very rigid, it's going to be a very long semester with you. I already talked about planning together, so we'll skip over that one. Don't take yourself so seriously. Have a little bit of fun with the situation. Have fun with the students as well. I think it's very important that the students get to see us as people and not necessarily just teachers. I think that goes a lot for our teaching as well. So find some ways to not only have fun with your partner teacher, but have some fun with the students as well. We've already talked a lot about communication. Bad communication leaves us less room to grow. I've been teaching for 16 years, but I try not to go into a class with the mindset that I know how this works. I find it very important that other teacher, I'm watching what they do. I'm listening to the advice they give me about things they think I should be doing differently. And I think that keeps me growing as a teacher and it makes me a better person. So don't be afraid to do that. And then as always, sometimes even the best relationships need a good counselor. So if you've got to sit down with your dean and say, hey, we're struggling here. Is there any advice that you can give us? Or we're finding that we are doing this very, very well. Can we talk to other teachers so that they know things that work well for them as well? So we're not going to put you in breakout groups anymore. Normally we would, but we're coming up on the end of our time anyway. So we'll kind of keep it as a big, large group here. I'm going to leave that email up on the screen for just a few minutes. If you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email at that address. I'll get back to you pretty quick. Speaking of emails, I find it very important, if at all possible, to return a student's email within 24 hours. I know sometimes that's not possible, but I have found that student work greatly improves participation, all of those things in the class, if I can respond to their emails within a day. So like I left Thursday, I said, hey guys, I'll keep talking with you Thursday. I'll keep talking with you Friday. I'll keep talking with you Saturday. Sunday's a pretty big holiday, as you may know. Leave me alone on Sunday. Let's go back to Monday. And generally your students are very receptive of, hey, I'm gonna be out of town this weekend. Or no, I can send you an email on Saturday. So do what works for you. But keep in mind that a lot of our students, especially the older ones, may have jobs. And so they may actually be doing a lot of their work on Saturday, and it's helpful if they can get a hold of us. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that down. I'm going to turn my camera back on. It was cutting up in my group. So hopefully I can keep up with y'all. Is there anything we want to talk about as a collective here in the last 5-10 minutes that we have as a group today?
Timothy, I have a question for you. So I just, when you say you do pass and no pass and associated with a lighter number grade, so what is the criteria? Is a pass account to 70 or 80? You know, how do you decide?
So what I do when I grade papers is I usually have a rubric, and I will total up what the points on the rubric are. And that will give me what the grade would be. But instead of telling the student what that grade is, I'm going to write pass. And then I might write a couple reasons to indicate that this is not an A paper. You might want to consider revising this paper. Or I would write fail, and then I would write several of the reasons that it did not achieve. And so they don't see the rubric, they don't see their grade. And what this forces them to do is, instead of taking my advice about what's wrong, is they have to reflect on their work. And now they're going back in, because if I tell you where all your commas are wrong, then all you're going to do is put in commas where I said to put them in. You're going to turn it, and you didn't learn anything. All I did was I became a very free editor. You're still a C, D, F student, but now you're indicating that you're going to pass this class. So to get rid of all of that, if students want to revise, they don't get specific feedback from me. They get this passed, this did not pass. Here's some things you're going to want to fix. You got a week to do this. You got 2 weeks to do it, whatever the case may be. And so they have to reflect, they have to go find the problems. And that forces them to demonstrate learning instead of regurgitation of the material. And it's a very interesting grading process. Students don't necessarily take to it very well at first. Especially your students who are very grade centered, you're going to get a lot of pushback from them. But the students who are more open to what is known as the growth mindset are going to absolutely flourish in this kind of environment. That answer your question? Anybody have any? Again, I'm going to kill my video because I don't know if the screen froze from one of y'all or if it froze from me. I'm still moving in my window. Anything else anybody wants to ask questions about or discuss something in a little bit more detail that we covered today?
Tim, I can see your chat, but I don't see you.
Okay, I killed the video because everything kind of froze on this end, and it was doing that yesterday when I was teaching a class. And when I killed the video, it worked fine. If that's all you have, we're going to get you out of here.
Is the link for the evaluation? Do we need to do the session evaluation? I didn't see the link.
I don't know about those links. Those were emailed to you, not me.
Okay. The
I
email
just
to
want to
us.
take a few minutes here. Again, thank you for participating today. We'll get you a little quick break before those 11:30 sessions start. I'm going to dump my email in the chat one more time. That way, if you didn't get it off of that slide, you can send me an email and we can continue this conversation throughout the upcoming semesters and however you want that to be. And again, I like to learn from your experiences as well, because you never know when something's going to happen in your classroom you hadn't planned for, but it's already happened to somebody else. And they can kind of give you some tips for that as well. So again, thank you for coming today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and we will see you sometime in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.